Right, let me get you added in here. All right, hello. It is Alexandria Maloney, and I am a BPIA board member, and I'll also be your host of BPIA Chats today. I hope everyone is staying safe and lifted during this time. Our BPIA Chat series hopes to share the experiences and insights of members of the international affairs community and hopefully inspire the next generation to explore opportunities in the field. The thoughts and views of our guest speakers are their own and do not reflect the views of BPIA. We currently are streaming live, and this talk will be posted to our IGTV as well as our YouTube channel afterwards. If you haven't already, please follow Black Professionals in International Affairs on our Instagram page at IABPIA, as well as our guest speaker, whose handle can be found in the flyer on our page. And lastly, we encourage viewers to chime in below in the thread with questions and comments. So without further ado, I will introduce our guest speaker. Byron L. Williams, son of Shirley J. Williams, hails from the famous city of Las Vegas, Nevada, and now calls the district home with his wife and two sons. He has professional experience with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and the U.S. Peace Corps. His professional background stems from his passion of leadership and cross-cultural experiences that have included creating and implementing public speaking programs, instructing English language learners, training and developing staff and colleagues with a focus on customer service, various forms of professional communication, leadership skills, and conflict resolution. Thank you so much, Byron, for joining us today.
Welcome.
So I'd like to start off by asking if you could tell us about what got you to where you are now, whether that's the academic side and the professional side, life side of that journey.
So first off, thank you very much for having me. I am a huge proponent and fan of BPIA, as well as yourself, Miss Maloney. First thing, let me see. So how I got here was actually, I'd probably say my thirst for language. When I was in high school, back in Vegas, I started studying Spanish, and Spanish is what kind of sparked my curiosity for learning more about my community back home in Vegas. It is where I grew up is started off as primarily African American, and then with the influx of a lot of Mexican immigrants, slowly shifted toward to being Black and Mexican. So it was really me wanting to learn how to communicate better with a lot of our incoming neighbors who at that time, a lot of them did not speak English. So based on my wanting to learn another language, I ended up taking up minoring in Spanish when I was in college at Colorado Mesa University in a very small place in Grand Junction, Colorado, with a major in public relations. And what I was really looking for was a way to become fluent in Spanish. And by happenstance, I ended up finding the United States Peace Corps, which I was like, hey, if this is an opportunity where it will allow me to live in another country and to work in another country, then, that's what I was looking for. So from there, I served in the small African country of Lesotho in the bottom of Africa. And people ask me, like, how did that happen? Lesotho as a country does not speak Spanish, but I was asked to serve where my skills were strong. And I had also done a lot of work with youth development well before I finished my first degree. So, getting long story short, it was language that basically drove me to where I am now. And that enabled me to have lived and to have worked on the continent of Africa, the continent of Europe, and specifically in Ukraine. It's allowed me to really kind of build my professional skills around recruitment, around intercultural communications, around language, around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a lot of other HR functions. And it also is what drove me to receive my master's degree at American University with a School of International Service, major or focusing on United States foreign policy and national security.
Thank you. So around the topic of finding your niche, what advice do you have for college students, for young professionals who think that they have an interest in international affairs or are exploring that space? What are some things that they could do to learn more about intercultural communications and cultural related things in international affairs?
One of the things that I kind of found out on the way, like basically on this path, was there were things that I was passionate about that I did not know how to pursue. And so there were a lot of opportunities that led to other opportunities just by me saying yes, even though I might not have been necessarily interested in them. And so to answer your first question, how can I, what advice would I give about helping younger students to kind of find their niche? I know for me, one of the things I started looking at in my, that I wish I would have done earlier is kind of like made a list of the things that I was interested in, what I'm, maybe a couple of different end goals, and then seeing where I felt I could add value as well as where I could learn. And I say that because, there was a key moment in my life when I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine, when Peace Corps offered me that service. I had no interest in serving in Eastern Europe. I had a lot of the stereotypes in my head, a lot of the things that, I've seen on TV or heard from other people about just being and living in Eastern Europe. But at the same time, my passion was in sub-Saharan Africa. And a lot of that was based on like my friends, a lot of the things I had read, just where I was going. And so I thought, well, I've already kind of developed a professional background that was tied to sub-Saharan Africa. What could I benefit by also having an experience in Eastern Europe? And that's actually, I felt, has been one of the greatest blessings, is having the opportunity to be in a place where one, there aren't a lot of Black people, Africans or Black Americans. And because of having that experience, it's allowed me to really connect with and talk with a lot of people. So looping back around and finding your niche is look at opportunities and where they can lead you, but also have maybe a number of end goals in mind and kind of work backwards. So that might mean, for me, being interested in international affairs, as a broad category, and then kind of breaking that down, what regions I've been interested in, what topics I've been interested in, and then pursuing them from there.
Thank you. Hi to everyone who's joining in. I'm seeing a few BPIA members here and BPIA board members. I want to shout out Vannery, Kong, and DeAndre at Real Recollective, as well as Tanya, who just hopped in, who will all be speaking later this week and early next week. So thank you guys for joining. We're here with Byron L Williams, who's with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, as well as his experience with the U.S. Peace Corps. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to drop them below. And Mr. Byron, my next question for you is in relation to the work that you've done. So what do you like most about the work that you've done and that you do?
Working across cultures. One of the things growing up is I think a lot of this had to do with my mom, Shirley J Williams, is when she was growing up, our family, but at the time they had gone to, my mom's originally from Tennessee, and they had, while she was in Tennessee, it was right around the time of integration. And so my grandfather was really wanting my mother to have more opportunity than she had in their neighborhood. So he sent her to an integrated school, which was like she was one of the first wave for that school. And this was back in the 60s, I think it was. And, so growing up, my mother was always kind of a silent proponent of learn how to work with different people because you never know what you might learn. And while you're doing it, make sure you take care of your people, meaning, Black Americans. And so from that, I really grew up learning how to interact with and learn from, as well as share my culture with other cultures. And so throughout all my jobs, that has been one of the common threads is I kind of have been the bridge between a lot of different cultures. With one of the jobs that I had where I worked at a casino back in Vegas, even though I was a training specialist, it was because I spoke Spanish, which is how I really built a lot of my relationships with a lot of staff that typically were not comfortable with coming to HR because one, the language barrier and the perceived class barrier. And so by being able to speak Spanish, I ended up gaining a great reputation with a lot of the line staff, which also helped me to gain a great reputation with a lot of the leadership within the the corporation. And based on that, a lot of people who where Spanish was not their first language also started reaching out to me. So people who were from, various countries, Liberia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Moldova, just a ton of different countries, but they saw how easily I could build relationships with people from different places. And that's kind of been one of the common threads throughout my professional career, throughout my volunteer experiences, as well as my personal life.
Mm. And in living in many of these places, were there ever experiences that you had where it was challenging to connect or maybe frustrating in terms of like language barrier or general misunderstanding? And what advice do you have for overcoming those obstacles?
Yeah, I think I can't help but to have had, you should have a challenging experience at some point. I think that's just a given when you're dealing with, people in general. There was one specific time that I can remember. I was where was I? I was in Ukraine, and I was having a really hard time establishing a relationship with the university English department or language department that I worked in. And come to find out, the reason I was kind of hitting that barrier was because a lot of the female instructors, their perception of me was based on a lot of negative stereotypes. And so once I found that out, I continued with doing what I was doing, which was basically being professional, helping them to learn how to, do things better for their department, their professional career. And after a while, I basically had a couple of the female instructors who, in a way, they vouched for me being a, professional and being there for what the intended purpose was, which was to instruct, to help other instructors, and to be a part of that professional community. And so I think one of the things for me is I've always thought about when challenges come, those challenges have been a way for me to prove myself, but also a way for me to have community to question why they're presenting me with that challenge. One of the things that I have always done is, when hitting some of those roadblocks is asked, why are you, in a layman's way, why are you giving me a hard time? Or what have I done for you to not trust me? At the same time, what have you done to gain my trust? So that way it's seen as a two-way street. But I think with all challenges come opportunities. And that's what's really kind of been my ethos is, out of those challenges really comes a way to build relationships. And not only for me to build those relationships, but to use those relationships to help other people to learn, what they might need to experience or go through or to possibly avoid.
Thank you. So how has COVID-19 and the coronavirus situation, how has that been affecting the work that you do?
Whew. So the work that I do for USDA, am a training specialist with the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. So a lot of what I do is based on, face-to-face interaction, leading training sessions, developing curriculum, a lot of also face-to-face collaboration with a number of my colleagues. So right now, during this pandemic, COVID-19, it's, I think like many people, it's been a lot of conference calls, a lot of teleconferencing, a lot of things like this, a lot of video conferencing. And I think one of the things that it has also helped me to do, though, is to learn how to work, learn how to work more in a way by myself, but also learning how to find different ways to collaborate or to work with different community. I think, for the jobs that I've had, they're very, they're jobs that have a lot to do with face-to-face, a lot of collaboration, and even the people that I work with, that's what all of us have been used to. And so we have gotten used to doing a lot of meetings this way. I think the other thing that I thought about a lot, though, too, is for the people who, where they might not be able to necessarily, their job might not provide them the flexibility of doing things such as teleworking or teleconferencing or being able to work remotely. It is finding other digital ways to communicate. So, maybe it might be a FaceTime call. Maybe it might be a lot more texting than I'm used to. Maybe it might be a lot more phone calls than I'm used to. And so I've had to really think throughout my day, okay, who do I communicate with? Who do I talk to, like face to face on a daily basis? And then finding ways for us to really be present with one another, even though it might not be face to face.
I'm finding it interesting that things that were once said could never be digital or never be done virtually are now suddenly, conference call, like that this unfortunate situation is, in my opinion, transforming the way that federal agencies and nonprofit organizations and the like are doing business or doing their work. I saw a few other folks join. I just wanted to say hello. We are here with Byron L Williams, our friend from U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, with a background with the U.S. Peace Corps. And for those who have recently joined, please feel free to drop comments and questions in the thread below. So my next question to you is there anything that you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started this career path?
Yes, that it is who was it? Taylor yesterday, Taylor Reddick. She said something that really stuck with me, which is being behind the wall, I think it was. And I say that in relation to international relations, foreign affairs, the field. This is a hard field to break into, especially when you don't have the connections, or you might not have what is perceived as the regular background. And so one of the things that I wish I would have known at an earlier stage of my career is what opportunities were out there, because I had no idea. Unfortunately for me, I found out about this field when I was, I'd probably say really maybe 5-6 years after college. That's not true. Maybe 4 years after college. And just finding out what that field really meant. I knew, in high school, you go through government class, you go through civics. But when it comes to learning about, okay, what is the talk of foreign policy about? What does it entail? Does it entail like nuclear proliferation, diplomacy? Does it entail defense? Human trafficking? All those things. Had no idea what any of those discussions were about when I was younger. And it wasn't until really doing a lot more reading about foreign policy that I started to find out other things. And so was one, all the different, and two, seeking a mentor. Career, I have had a lot of people away. Definitely been a blessing from me figuring a lot of things. I found out about all this very late. Who was it? Alan, who spoke from USAID on Monday. She talked a lot about back and what kind of our experience looks like compared to white counterparts, where may have found many Black Americans who found out at a much so with that Payne Fellowship through USAID fellowship through what is it, JET, was it Japan Education Training Program, like a lot of these places and things I didn't know about. So it was like, oh, I could have been preparing myself either in high school or college to be competitive for all these things, going into grad school or going into my career. So, it's been finding out late and having to play catch up. At the same time, it's also experience with a lot of younger page where they have learned at an earlier stage in their career or their profession what they want. As you can see, I have a little bit of gray before a number of folks, kind of banging their head up against the wall. I'm right there with you because, I have now been able to kind of make a solid footprint, a solid impact, but it's also been, much later in life than probably a lot of other people where they started in their, maybe their late teens or early 20s, knowing where they wanted to go versus me, where I found out, I probably say I was around 27, probably 27 when I became serious about pursuing this kind of career path. And it's still been challenging. So yeah, I think I wish I would have known at a much earlier stage how to break in. But I think a part of that also comes with exposure and representation. Being from where I'm from in Vegas, international relations is not something that people talk about. The exposure, I never knew anybody who was in international affairs, diplomacy, any of that when I was in high school or in college. The closest that I got was Nellis Air Force Base, and that's, obviously DOD, but, that was talking to people who served. It wasn't like, oh, let me have a conversation about national defense or national security or weapons or, any of that stuff. So, some of those things I've thought about and talked about a lot because it's really helped me to share my experience with a lot of people who are, much younger, who have had very little exposure or who are seeking ways to kind of get their, to dip their toe in this field.
Thank you. So we have a question here from ET Phone HME1. And he said, the person said, can you speak about your experience with agriculture? When people think of careers in international affairs, they often think only of state or U.S. aid, and we don't hear much about careers, international careers, I think he means, at other departments.
Yeah, so specifically with working at USDA, we have the Foreign Agricultural Service, which is a part of DA. So it's one of the 4 service agencies. When we talk about state, USAID, Foreign Agricultural Service through USDA, and Department of Commerce also has a foreign service. Specifically though with USDA, we have a lot of what kind of our international, arm does is looking at ways to kind of build relationships across borders, across barriers, as well as, things that have to do with biotechnology, regulatory services. So learning and seeing like how we can protect crops, seeing how we can possibly, build relationships as it pertains to trade, things that have to do with, developing different strains of seeds. Things like that. We also have through the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, which is one of the departments or agencies within USDA, we have what's called international services. And so what they do is they provide a lot of the, I want to say like, training when it comes to teaching different communities how to work within agriculture. So it might be learning how to rotate crops. It might be learning how to build food security within communities, things like that. So yeah, we do have a number of, actually more so a number. We have two foreign service kind of agencies within USDA, the Foreign Agriculture Service, and international services. But thinking of ways to work with USDA besides the official Foreign Agriculture Service and through APHIS, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service.
And what I'm learning, think about it, almost area has some international aspect to it. So whether it's sector or the private sector, corporations, entertainment, fashion, media, communications, agriculture, commerce, all of these areas have some international component to it, and likely have an international department or bureau associated with it. So thank you for that question.
You're welcome. I was going to say, everybody is trying to figure out a way to, build relationships to hopefully provide for their communities, for their people, for their countries, for their states. And so, right. I think a lot of times we talk about the actual foreign service agencies, but there are a plethora of ways to actually work internationally, whether it be through, diplomatic efforts. When you hear of programs like, I'm trying to think of something like Global Kids for one. When you talk about the Global Access Pipeline, when you hear about International Career Advancement Program, when you hear about also like congressional relations. So right. there's different ways, like you said, private sector as well as public sector, about all these places are trying to figure out ways where we can work hopefully hand in hand, but in a way that benefits our respective communities and not living inside of a bubble.
Absolutely. So we have one more question from the audience that I'll take, and then I have one concluding question here.
Okay.
This question is from our BPI board member and speaker who's coming later next week, Vannery Kong at _ Apsara. And she says, that's a good point. I have a question. How would you deal with imposter syndrome when learning about these opportunities at different times versus your counterparts?
The way that I have dealt with it is, even when there is that inkling of doubt, is pushing, and I don't want to say pushing forward because I don't want it to seem like I am saying suffer just to get through, but it's also what I have thought about is if I let fear paralyze me, then I will be where I am. And I don't ever want to regret not doing something simply out of fear. And I definitely hear the question about, in relation to some of my colleagues and counterparts. And I've thought a lot about how can I move forward while also respecting my struggle, while also bringing others along with me. I have something that's really stuck with me is one of my best friends, Dwayne Matthews, from Little Rock, is lift as I climb. And living by that motto, it's really helped me to think about, when I'm the only Black person in the room, and I, people might look at me like, why is he here? What does he have to contribute? Maybe his path has not been the traditional path of the rest of us, without the prestigious or the distinguished background. It's me knowing that at the least my experience is worth sharing. There was one time where I was in it was a diplomatic exercise, and I was the only Black person in the room, and this was with people from different parts of Eastern Europe, different officials from Department of State, and we started talking about trade. And because I think people only saw me as a university instructor, when I started talking about trade, and why it's important to acknowledge some of the injustices of the United States past and how that has played into current trade issues, all of a sudden it was like everybody was willing to talk. If I would not have said anything, one, people would have seen me as just an instructor, but two, people would not have seen me for what I could bring to the table. And so dealing with the imposter syndrome, it is having that fear, but also finding different ways to make it through, while still having that fear. And I know sometimes it can be paralyzing, but it's, I think one of the things that's really helped me is to know that my value is not necessarily based on what, my work is, but my experience and my work experience both work hand in hand for me to add value to whatever conversation, to whatever room that I'm in, and nobody else, no matter if it's you or if it's me, has had the experience that that I have had, and that means a lot.
That's right. And as people of color in this country, we've had particular experiences that some of our counterparts or colleagues that we work with may not have had, and different perspectives and views. So I definitely echo that last point that you made. I want to shout out some new friends of BPIA, the Black Russian Speakers account. So, feel free to go check out their page for more information on Black folks who speak Russian, which I think is really cool.
Me too.
And my final question that I have for you is the following, but also feel free to add any concluding thoughts or remarks in this question. But the question is, simply, what advice do you have for someone who is considering a similar job as yours or interested in the agricultural fields?
Yeah, the first one is always find ways to connect. In this age of, being able to connect digitally, it makes it so easy. One of the best tools, excuse me, one of the best tools that I've used for my career has been LinkedIn. One of the people who know me know I am an avid LinkedIn user, whether it's me finding people directly or whether it's me asking somebody to introduce me to somebody else. It's one of the ways is to constantly connect. It's also to find ways to learn more about the industry that you're involved in. For example, I worked with refugees a lot when I was younger, but I didn't necessarily know a lot about human trafficking. So through a lot of people who I've met, I've been learning more about, labor rights, labor abuses, human trafficking, things like that. So I would say, constantly try to stay reading up on or learning more about industry. And in trying to break into the field, finding ways to connect. Who was it? Taylor yesterday spoke about Taylor Reddick, who was the guest speaker. She spoke about finding different professional organizations. Like me, it was because of one of my friends who I worked at Peace Corps with. I ended up finding out about Black professionals in international affairs. And then because of meeting you by chance, hey now, I found out more about BPIA. So it's always finding out what groups are out there, because with finding and associating and being involved with professional organizations, that also gives you credibility. So then when you're stepping into a room, you have all the people who have come before you to really have your back, whether it be to vouch for you or to possibly bring you in. And always with opportunity, make sure you're bringing others along. Another thing that I kind of also always keep in my head is, as long as you are valuable to somebody's network will be valuable to you. And hopefully, really reciprocating that, or having that reciprocity. So just always find, as you're getting these opportunities, also sharing those opportunities with other people or creating opportunities for other people. I do feel, whether you think of it as grace or a blessing or karma, that life will give you what you put out.
Byron, thank you so much for speaking to us today. Thank you to everyone who joined. To get more information, follow BPIA. Also, please follow Byron L Williams. His information can be found in the flyer on our page. We thank you again for coming and speaking to us and sharing your experiences. And we hope to see everyone at future. Did you have one more point?
Yeah, I just want to say, would you mind if I plugged a couple organizations that have been valuable?
Please do.
Okay, yeah. So one is the United States Peace Corps as a federal agency, because it's what really has been a stepping stone for me in my career, but it's also what's allowed me to reach out to so many more Black people as well as people of color in getting into this field. Also, the International Career Advancement Program, which is a organization that is geared towards encouraging, creating support, and really helping as a networking tool for people of color from mid to senior ranks in their international affairs career. Also, BPIA, for what you do, the people that you bring together, it is an amazing family. And I just want to say thank you for being so involved and on the board. And yeah, I just want to say, and Global Kids too. They're really doing a great job of reaching out to communities of color, in particular Black communities, from the high school level, with kind of availing students who are interested in having more of an international affairs perspective as a supplement to their current kind of education. So I just wanted to say thank you to all those organizations, and to all of them, keep doing what you're doing and bring all of us along.
All righty, great. So we look forward to seeing everyone at future BPIA chats. Thank you for coming, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye. Okay, look for Andre in a little bit, y'all. DeAndre.
Yep. Yes, coming up at 12. Thank you so much. Coming up at 12 o'clock, we have DeAndre, who's currently a master's candidate at Cornell University, working with ACE-FION, a background in international development, coming on at 12 o'clock to discuss mentorship and maximizing your mentors network. So I look forward to seeing everyone in about 20 minutes.
See ya.